Freedom is a gift from God that needs to be used responsibly.
And freedom is a gift that can go too far if it harms others.
The American Religious Town Hall is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here is your host and moderator.
Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here joining us today. We have a team of panelists who are going to delve into a very intriguing topic. My name is Andrea Luxton, and I'm the moderator for today, and I would like our panelists to introduce themselves, starting to my right.
I'm Bishop Michael Olson, and I serve as the Bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Fort Worth.
My name is Rabbi Dan Levin. I'm the Senior Rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
Hi, I'm Tom Plumbley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. I serve as senior minister at First Christian Church in downtown Fort Worth, Texas.
My name is Mel Robeck. I'm Senior Professor of Church History and Ecumenics and Special Assistant to the President for Ecumenical Relations at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. I am also an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God.
Thank you all very much. And now our topic for the day. It is individuals from faith traditions that have often been the strongest in decrying the move by federal and state governments or by organizations to impose mandates during the COVID-19 pandemic. This objection ranges from masks to vaccination mandates. Even when there are religious exemptions permitted, any different treatment of those who are unvaccinated, such as limitations to enter venues or travel restrictions, is called out as coercive, pushing people into vaccinations. This group argues all of this is against the free choice God has given us over our bodies. However, it is also individuals of faith who strongly argue for tightened abortion regulations, for example, or stand against those that support the right to end life through euthanasia. This group argues strongly in favor of laws that prevent free choice when it comes to the perceived taking of life. In all of these cases, personal freedom on one hand and responsibility for the safety or life of others comes into conflict. While the arguments in each case may differ, one question remains the same. At what point should personal freedom given by God become restricted because of God-given responsibilities to the sanctity of life or love of others? So the panel is asked to answer at least the following questions. Number one, where does an individual's right to free will end? Secondly, what principles would you use to decide where the fine line is between freedom and responsibility? And thirdly, are there any negotiables or non-negotiables when it comes to the limits of freedom, such as the law or life of another? I'll go back to our panelists that started the conversation to further develop their ideas.
I think this is always a real problem because there's a balancing act between freedom and responsibility. All those of us who are free also have certain responsibilities on how we use that freedom. Where those responsibilities lie, the extent, the boundaries in which they appear, I think are sometimes difficult for us to understand or to manage. I think in the Old Testament, in 1 Samuel 8, I think it is, the people of God come to the prophet and they say to him, "We want a king like everybody else has." And he says, "Well, are you sure that's what you want?" And they said, "Yes, that's what we want." So he asked God, what should he say? And God says, "Well, I want you to give him the following warning. If they have a king like everybody else does. They will be taxed. Their children will be conscripted into the military. They will have to farm the farms of the king. They will have to give the best of their flocks and of their vineyards and of their fields to the king. They will be taxed 10%, and it goes on. There's quite a list of all these things that you give up in terms of your freedom if you change or if you take that on as a new responsibility. All these new responsibilities, I didn't know that came with the freedom to have a king. Well, we don't have a king in the U.S. We have a democracy. We have many kings. We call it Congress, we call it the president, we call it state and local kinds of ventures. And we realize that all these kinds of things that Samuel had told them that God wanted, or was warning them, this is what's going to happen, we're stuck with that. So the question is, how do we hold these people responsible, and what kind of responsibility do we have and yet guarantee the maximum kind of freedom that we have? And I think we're in a big struggle there about how much we're going to spend and on what kinds of priorities we're going to spend it, what kinds of rules or laws we're going to have, and who they're going to cut off and who they're going to enable. And I don't think there are any easy solutions to any of these things. What I do think is that we are called to love God and we are called to love our neighbor. And when we don't love our neighbor, when we take actions that harm them, when we take actions that limit our neighbor, and I don't think of neighbor as simply the person next door. I don't even think of it as the person within our community, the American civilization. I think it belongs to the world. They are our neighbor. If we are doing things that are going against them or hurting them, then we have taken away their freedom to act and to live responsibly. So I think we really have to struggle with the question of freedom and responsibility. And I think the two go together. The question is, where is that balance going to be struck?
Bishop Olson.
I think that's an excellent introduction. And I think freedom and responsibility is often balanced with right reason, judgment, and that's ultimately freedom is not our ultimate good. I mean, it's not the highest good in a certain sense. It's essential, all right, absolutely essential to our human flourishing. But it also, we can abuse our freedom, and that can be measured by how we harm ourselves, how we harm others. And I think that's where the responsibility comes in, and that's going to look differently in local societies, in family life, in a national level as well as an international level. But the principles, I think, remain the same. I think, particularly with regard to freedom, if freedom is its own good and it's the highest good, then really everything comes down to arbitrariness and caprice. All right, and it's the weak and those who are most who have their freedom inhibited the most by physical disabilities, by financial problems, by coming up short, as it were, in the natural lottery, that suffer the most, and in which case then our freedom, or an exercise of the freedom of the more powerful, becomes basically it inhibits the freedom of the least powerful. And I think that's a big measurement. Now, with regard to COVID-19 and stuff, I think, and vaccines, I think the challenge is that in principle, vaccinations are a very good thing in the sense that they contribute to the public health, they free us all up, we have a healthier society, and they especially protect the vulnerable. I think also, though, it's also a chief responsibility for those who develop the vaccines to show sound science. And one of the things that's confused us today, that's fed a lot of the conspiracy theorists, is it comes back to for-profit health care, and especially in the pharmaceutical industry, where a vaccine, in a sense, who's invested in it and who makes money, and is there a conflict of interest? And I think that's where the free market has harmed us again in matters of health. But with regard to freedom, it's not absolute, and my will is not sovereign over everybody else.
Excellent.
So
Rabbi.
I would sort of echo all of these thoughts. You know, so intrinsic to our faith tradition is the intrinsic, basic, fundamental value of freedom. The entire narrative of the Exodus is a narrative about freedom as a good. Mm-hmm. But what is remarkable is it's not freedoms for freedom's sake. The Holy One didn't liberate the Israelites from slavery in Egypt to run rampant and do whatever they wanted in the wilderness. They were brought, the narrative teaches us, to a particular mountain to be one with each other and to enter into a covenant of mutual responsibility that was shared amongst all the Israelites for each other and between them and the Holy One. And I think we tend to look at freedom as an end in itself. And so much what I think our faith traditions teach us is that freedom is only useful such that as it leads to duty. And our understanding and our appreciation of the fact that we have responsibilities to each other. There's an Italian visitor to America, Giuseppe Mazzini, who in 1860 talked about the dangers of the egotistical focus on freedom. He said, so long as society doesn't focus on duty, that society is fragile and at risk of breaking. And I think that even though we might look at basic social contract theory as a warrant for us to realize we have to give up some freedom to be a part of a society that is collectively responsible for safety and security, I think we also have to realize that when the sages looked at the difference between a human being and an angel, it says that the Holy One preferred human beings. Because even though they were flawed, even though they were limited, they had freedom of choice. An angel can only do what the Holy One bids that angel to do. And it's because they don't have that free will that their moral quality is eliminated. But moral quality says that even though you have freedom, you have to use that freedom towards maintaining and promoting the collective good, which is why I think some of the pushes from society towards that sense of duty are probably right and meaningful and useful.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to Dr. Robeck's commentary on the story out of Samuel and say that, you know, I think in the end we tend to see ourselves as kings, all of us, and require that we be treated that way. So the answer to your first question, Madam Moderator, which was where does an individual's right to free will or freedom end, has always been at the end of another's nose. Which means that in the theological context, it means that each of us recognizes the image of God in the other. And if we, you talk about something baked into our theology from the very beginning, from the very first stories about what human being is, it is that each of us bears the image of God. Therefore, each of us is sacred. And if we do not treat each other that way, then we sin. And so for religious folk and religious organizations to be leading in the fight to keep people from having to do things that help other people stay healthy and stay well and keep them from dying is just against everything that we teach. and everything that those religious organizations teach. And so, therefore, I don't know where all that comes from. It's here in the state of Texas, in last November's elections, we passed a constitutional amendment that there can never be a reason that any entity of the state can ask a religious organization to not hold its worship services, regardless of the circumstances. It is in our Constitution that you cannot ever do that.
You can ask, you just can't mandate it.
Yeah, and so as if religious organizations are then free, as no other people are, free to hurt other people, to do things that are against the public health, simply because they wish to do it that way. And all of that to me makes very little sense.
Well, yeah, I was thinking the freedom is something that has limits. Freedom is never free, ever. There are always contingencies on it. But I do think that we as free individuals have the right to limit our own freedom for the sake of others. And I think we often forget that in this particular time when we think everything is about our right. I have the right to do this. I have the right to do that. And we fail to understand the limitations, the ability to self-limit our freedom in a responsible way that takes care of other people.
See, I would suggest that some of those that will argue that the government can't would choose to say, but I can do it as my self-choice.
Well, that's exactly it. I think responsibility is not born of the restraint of freedom by law. You know, responsibility is born of right reason in implementing my freedom.
I think the question becomes, you know, at what point does the government need to step in because people are not being responsible in their use of freedom? Right. And so that question is an ominous decision.
Very much.
And I think that we have to get to a point where we realize that there are times that the government does actually need to come in and restrict freedom, whether it's the freedom to operate in a marketplace with impunity or the freedom to go to school without vaccines because I might be carrying diseases that could create an unsafe environment for other young people or whatever it is. I think we're probably going to be better served as a society the more that we can return our focus onto a conversation of duty, where we say to ourselves, not what do you owe me, but what do I owe you?
I think this is pre-COVID. There's interest like in the in emergency treatment in hospitals, with regard many times to Jehovah's Witnesses, Christ Scientists, where if it's a minor in question, where transfusion is absolutely against the doctrine of Jehovah's Witness, and if it's a minor, the hospital will get a court order and the state will intervene. Why? Because the interest of life. All right. Well, that's a legitimate intervention and interest, even though I think it requires a little bit of question and discernment when you talk to a Jehovah's Witness, and in their authentic belief, it's akin to rape and a deep violation. And I've heard that from women, Jehovah's Witness tradition. So I don't think it's as easy to say government comes in and saves us, nor is it saying that even the church has a right to caprice.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I think we're almost time for our break, and so we'll take that break, and then we'll come back to hear the closing statements. Thank you.
We hope you're enjoying today's program. If you'd like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the vision and history of the program, and we invite you to become a ministry partner explore our Town Hall Estates healthcare facilities, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, we look forward to receiving your letters. You may write us at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. If you have a prayer request, please send it to prayerrequest@americanreligious.org. Thank you for writing and thank you for watching. Now, back to today's closing statements.
Welcome back. I'm sure as you've been listening to today's program, you have some questions and some thoughts. So please do take us up on our offer. Please send your messages, send your emails. We would love to hear from you. And now let's go to our closing comments. Bishop Olson.
The issue of freedom and free will as a gift from God and what's constitutive of the human person has been the topic of philosophers, theologians for centuries, even predating the time of Christ. The question is, what is remarkably human about freedom is that with freedom we have the ability to love. And that is, in a sense, the most human activity we can do because it's the most divine-like.
Thank you. We've said it 49 different ways in the past half hour. Freedom is not true freedom if it's not matched with responsibility. Freedom without responsibility is libertinism. But when it comes down to the real issues of the day, we have very real questions about how all of that gets lived out. I view the wearing of masks as a statement of love, a mark of love for the other person. I view getting vaccinated as a statement of love, a mark of love for the other person. Yes, mistakes, as the bishop mentioned, mistakes have been made in the rollout of all of that and in the information about how all that happened, partly caused by the fact that we suddenly had this pandemic upon us and hadn't curbed it in the first place. But the bottom line is we must always be seeking to find out how we can treat the other person out there, whether they live down the street from us or on the other side of the globe from us, and honor the sacred in them.
I think that putting the responsibility and freedom together, it was fairly significant. And I think that responsibility can either take the edge off of freedom, or it can contribute to or reinforce freedom. In taking the edge off, we can look and we can complain, oh, they charge us too many taxes, they spend the money in the wrong way, and we can get really angry about the freedom that our democratic representatives take with our money, our time, our energy, our whatever. At the other side of it, though, I think that responsibility contributes or reinforces freedom. And all you have to do is think about, what do you do with your teenage kids? You know they need freedom. You know that they need to grow into a greater, more freedom. But you also know that they have to be responsible with the use of that freedom. How are they going to use the car? How late are they going to stay out? What are the friends that they're going to be spending time with, and so forth? Employees need freedom as well. They need to be free to express themselves, to use their own creativity in productions of various things. But they must also do the job that's expected of them by the employer. And people have to be freed, and they can be free to take that vaccine, or they can be free not to take that vaccine. But there are consequences to whichever way they go. Either way, they may help the community at large, or they may hurt the community at large. And I think responsibility is where we find the absolute need to limit our freedom ourselves.
In 1989, when the Berlin Wall fell, there was enormous pressure put on President George Bush Sr. to go to Berlin and to declare victory in the Cold War.
Yep.
And he refused.
Yep.
And leaders from both sides of the aisle challenged him and said, why aren't you going? This is a moment. They impugned his leadership. They said he was weak, that he was unfeeling, he was uncaring. And later, it came out that the reason why President Bush decided not to go was that he knew that Mikhail Gorbachev was making serious risks in order to advance the cause of perestroika and freedom in the former Soviet Union, and that if he had gone to Berlin and danced a victory dance on the rubble of that wall, it would have put a finger in his eye, and it would have really made it far more difficult for him. And in fact, many say that that actually led to President Bush losing his second term. Sometimes it happens that your prosperity requires my sacrifice. Yes. Sometimes it requires not to press your advantage just because you can, but to restrain yourself and use forbearance so that the other can prosper. And I think that part of what we really need to do is to allow the room for people to see the other as my responsibility. If the government needs me to impose and limit my freedom so that you can prosper, so that you can be safe, those are restrictions that we should welcome, not fight.
Yep.
Well, what an excellent conversation. The point that's going to stay with me, I think, here is this constant repetition that I've heard from all of the panelists, which is this is really about us looking at the other person, not at ourselves. The responsibility limiting our freedom is not really a limitation. It is actually a gift that we are given because that responsibility is what we are how we are reaching out and touching the lives of others, and that's what makes the difference. The Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestant, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory but in reality. And now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.